The stars looked different when Commander Vexhai saw them through the bridge of his scout ship. Each point of light represented another world the Zephyrian hegemony could claim. For 300 years, his people had spread across the galaxy like a slow tide. They found primitive worlds, took what they needed, and moved on. It was simple work. "Commander, we have found something," his navigator called out. The young officer's voice carried excitement. Finding new worlds always excited the young ones. Vexhai walked to the scanner display. The system had one star, several dead planets, and one blue-green world in the perfect zone for life. Initial scans showed water, oxygen, and the heat signatures of large cities. Another world to add to the hegemony's collection. "What do we know about them?" Vexhai asked. The science officer pulled up data on his screen. Primitive radio signals going back about 200 years. Nuclear technology, but very basic. No space infrastructure we can detect. Population estimates suggest around 8 billion individuals. Vexhai nodded. It was always the same story. Young species that barely understood fire compared to hegemony. Technology. Their plasma cannons could level mountains. Their shields could stop anything these primitives might throw at them. The hegemony's smallest warship carried more firepower than most species could build in a lifetime. "Open communication channels," Vexhai ordered, "all frequencies." The communication officer worked at his console. "Channels open, Commander." Vexhai straightened his uniform. This was ceremony now, a tradition that went back generations. "Primitive. Species of the third planet. This is Commander Vexhai of the Zephyrian hegemony. Your world has been selected for resource extraction and population management. You have one rotation of your planet to surrender completely. Any resistance will result in complete elimination. This is your only warning." He cut the transmission and settled back in his command chair. Now came the waiting. Some species begged, others tried to bargain. A few attempted to hide. None had ever said no. 6 hours passed before the response came. It arrived on every frequency at once, broadcast with surprising technical skill. The voice was calm, speaking the common galactic language with a strange accent. "This is President Martinez of the United Earth Federation. We have received your ultimatum. Our answer is no." Vexhai blinked. His bridge crew looked at each other in confusion. No? Species didn't say no to the hegemony. They surrendered or they died. There was no third option. "Sir," the communication officer said carefully, "perhaps they did not understand the message?" Vexhai thought for a moment. Sometimes primitive species needed a demonstration. He had done this before. A show of power usually convinced them to be reasonable. "Target the large desert area on their main continent," he ordered. "Fire one plasma cannon. Low power, just enough to turn sand into glass." The weapons officer targeted the Sahara Desert. The plasma beam lanced down from orbit, superheating an area 50 kilometers across. Sand became glass in seconds. The energy release was visible from space as a bright flash. "Open channels again," Vexhai said. "This is Commander Vexhai. You have seen our power. We have many ships with many weapons. Surrender now, or we will. Target your cities next." The response came faster this time, the same voice still calm. "This is President Martinez. We have seen your demonstration. Our answer remains no." Now Vexhai was angry. These primitives were being deliberately stupid. He had been merciful, giving them a chance. But mercy had limits. "All ships, target the largest population centers," he commanded. His small scout fleet had 12 vessels. Each could level a city. "Prepare to fire on my command." The weapons powered up. Plasma cannons locked onto targets around the primitive world. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Mumbai, São Paulo. 6 cities, 6 examples. After this, surely they would surrender. Fire. The Phi. Plasma beams lanced downward toward Earth. They should have struck in seconds, turning cities into vapor. Instead, something impossible happened. The beams stopped, not reflected, not absorbed. They simply stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall in space. Energy that should have destroyed cities dissipated harmlessly into space. "What just happened?" Vexhai demanded. "Unknown, sir," the weapons officer stammered. "Our weapons fired correctly. but something intercepted them. "Sir," the scanner officer called out, "I'm detecting massive energy spikes from the planet's surface. Something is launching." Vex High looked at the display and felt his blood turn cold. Hundreds of objects were rising from Earth's surface. They moved wrong. Nothing should accelerate that fast without being crushed by its own speed. The primitive planet had no right to build anything that moved like that. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. Too late. The first projectile hit the ship, proud conqueror. It didn't explode. It didn't need to. Moving at 30% of light speed, it punched through the ship's shields like they weren't there. The proud conqueror simply came apart, its hull unable to contain the energy transfer. More projectiles followed. They moved with impossible precision, each one finding its target. The swift strike tried to jump to hyperspace. The projectile caught it anyway, somehow tracking through dimensions that should have been impossible for primitives to understand. "Sir, we need to retreat," his navigator screamed. Vex High watched 5 more of his ships die in seconds. These weren't primitive weapons. These were weapons that belonged to species far more advanced than his own. But the scans had been clear. Earth showed no signs of advanced technology. All remaining ships emergency jumped to hyperspace now. 3 ships managed to escape. 9 died in the first minute of combat against a species that shouldn't have been able to build faster-than-light communication, let alone weapons that could track through hyperspace. As his ship fled through the dimensional tunnel of hyperspace, Vex High tried to understand what had happened. Earth had hidden its true capabilities, but why? And how? Species didn't develop technology in secret. They showed off their achievements, built monuments to their engineering. Humans were different. And yet, hyperspace jump ended at the nearest hegemony outpost. Vex High's communications officer was already sending emergency signals to Fleet Command. This was no longer a simple conquest mission. This was first contact with a species that had just announced itself to the galaxy with violence. Admiral Kethron's face appeared on the communication screen. "Commander Vex High, report your status." "Sir, we have encountered significant resistance. The species appears to have hidden advanced military capabilities. We lost 9 ships in the first engagement." The Admiral's expression didn't change. In 3 centuries of expansion, the hegemony had rarely lost even 1 ship to primitive species. "Explain." Vex High told him everything. The strange projectiles, the impossible speeds, the tracking through hyperspace. As he spoke, he watched the Admiral's face grow darker. "And you're certain these readings are accurate?" "Yes, sir. Whatever they hit us with was moving at significant fractions of light speed. Our shields might as well have been decorative." "Admiral," Kethron was quiet for a long moment. "Commander, you are to remain at the outpost until further orders. I will be mobilizing the 47th Conquest Fleet." The transmission ended. Vex High slumped in his command chair. The 47th Conquest Fleet was 300 ships. Enough firepower to crack a planet's crust if needed. Surely that would be enough to handle whatever tricks the humans had hidden. But as he looked at the damage reports from his surviving ships, Vex High felt something he had never experienced in his military career: doubt. For the first time in hegemony history, they had attacked first and been hurt in return. The humans had been waiting for them. The question that terrified him was simple: what else were they hiding? Admiral Kethron had conquered 47 worlds in his career. Each time the pattern was the same. The hegemony fleet would arrive, the primitive species would see their superior technology, and surrender would follow within days. The 47th Conquest Fleet had never failed to bring a world into hegemony control. 3 months after Commander Vex High's disastrous first contact with Earth, Admiral Kethron sat in his flagship Eternal Dominion, leading 300 of the hegemony's finest warships toward the Sol system. Intelligence reports suggested that Earth's defenses were limited to whatever had destroyed Vex High's scouts. The planet itself showed no orbital defenses or space-based military installations. The reports were wrong. "Admiral," called his scanner. "Officer, we are detecting unusual readings from the outer planet with the ring system." Kethron moved to the scanner display. Saturn looked normal at first glance, a gas giant with beautiful rings of ice and rock. But as their sensors focused, Something was wrong with the rings. Sir, the ice chunks are showing power signatures. Before Kethran could respond, the rings lit up. Thousands of objects that had looked like harmless ice began moving with purpose. They weren't ice chunks. They were weapons platforms disguised and waiting. The first wave of projectiles came from everywhere at once. They moved at impossible speeds, just like the weapons that had destroyed Vexahai's fleet. The hegemony ship's shields held for exactly 3 seconds before the relativistic kill vehicles punched through them. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Kethran commanded. Return fire on the ring system. His ships spread out and began firing their plasma cannons at Saturn's rings. The beams hit their targets, turning some of the disguised platforms into vapor. But for every platform they destroyed, 10 more revealed themselves. The humans had turned an entire planetary ring system into a weapons grid. In the first 10 minutes of battle, Kethran lost 60 ships. Sir, his communication officer called out, we're receiving multiple signals from the gas giant with the large moons. Jupiter appeared on the main screen. Its 4 largest moons were moving, not orbiting, moving with intent and direction. As the hegemony fleet watched in horror, the moons began to open like flowers, revealing that they weren't moons at all. They were shipyards, massive construction facilities that had been disguised to look like natural satellites. And they were launching ships. Human vessels poured out of the fake moons by the hundreds. They looked nothing like proper warships. Where hegemony vessels were sleek and elegant, human ships were blocky and crude. They had too many weapon mounts, too much armor, and designs that hurt to look at. They looked like someone had taken spare parts and welded them together without caring about appearance. But they moved fast, and they carried enough firepower to light up scanner displays with warning signals. Sir, those human ships are reading power levels beyond anything in our database, the scanner officer reported, his voice shaking. The first wave of human ships hit the hegemony fleet like a hammer. Their weapons were impossible. Kinetic rounds that moved at speeds that should have torn the ships apart from recoil. Energy beams that cut through hegemony shields like cutting paper. Missiles that seemed to think for themselves, dodging defensive fire and finding weak spots in ship armor. But the worst part was how the humans fought. A hegemony destroyer found itself being rammed by a human ship half its size. The human vessel's crew had apparently decided that the fastest way to disable the destroyer was to crash into it at full speed. Both ships were destroyed, but the human crew had been singing something during the collision. Their radio channels carried what sounded like battle songs. Another human ship lost its main engines and began spinning out of control. Instead of retreating or calling for help, the crew overloaded their reactor and steered the spinning wreck into a hegemony cruiser. The explosion took out both vessels and damaged 2 more ships nearby. They're insane, whispered Kethran's tactical officer. They're using their own ships as weapons. It got worse. Human boarding parties launched themselves through space in simple pressure suits carrying primitive chemical projectile weapons. These crude guns somehow penetrated hegemony personal shields and armor. The boarding parties fought like demons, taking impossible risks and showing no fear of death. On the cruiser, Pride of Zephyr, human boarders had somehow gotten control of the ship's main weapon systems. The cruiser began firing on other hegemony vessels while its own crew tried to regain control. The battle ended when the human boarders overloaded the ship's power core rather than surrender. Admiral Kethran watched his fleet being systematically destroyed by an enemy that fought like the laws of physics were suggestions, and death was an acceptable tactical option. His ships were better designed, his crews better trained, his weapons more advanced. But the humans didn't seem to care about any of that. Sir, the humans are broadcasting something, his communication officer reported. Put it through. A human voice filled the bridge, speaking an accented but clear galactic standard. This is Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You came to our system looking for a fight. How are you enjoying it so far? Kethran opened his own communication channel. This is Admiral Kethran of the Hegemony 47th Conquest Fleet. Your tactics are barbaric. No civilized species fights this way. Civilized? The human admiral laughed. You came here to destroy our cities and enslave our people. You call that civilized? We call it Tuesday. Another wave of human ships emerged from behind Jupiter's real moons. These ships were even larger than the first wave, with weapon arrays that made Kethron's flagship look lightly armed. "You have superior numbers," Kethron said, trying to maintain some dignity. "This proves nothing about your military capability." "Numbers?" Admiral Chen sounded amused. "Oh, you think this is our main fleet? How adorable. This is just the local defense force. Would you like to see what happens when we get serious?" On the scanner display, new signals appeared throughout the system. Ships were emerging from hiding places that shouldn't have been able to hide anything. Asteroid fields revealed themselves as camouflaged bases. Space that had appeared empty suddenly filled with human vessels. Kethron realized with growing horror that the entire solar system was a trap. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid had been turned into part of a massive defensive network. The humans hadn't just been hiding their capabilities. They had been planning this battle for months. "Sir," his scanner officer called out, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the inner planets as well." Mars was opening up like a mechanical flower. The entire planet's surface was sliding apart to reveal shipyards that dwarfed anything the hegemony had ever built. Venus was doing something similar, its thick atmosphere parting to show massive railgun installations pointed directly at the hegemony fleet. "Retreat," Kethron whispered. "Sir?" "Retreat," he screamed. "All ships, emergency hyperspace jump. Get us out of here." As his remaining ships began powering up their hyperspace drives, Admiral Chen's voice came over the communication channels one last time. "Running away so soon? And here we were just getting warmed up. Tell your leaders that Earth remembers who fired the first shot. We'll be in touch." 67 ships managed to escape out of the 300 that had entered the Sol system. As Kethron's flagship fled through hyperspace, he tried to process what he had seen. The humans didn't just have hidden military technology, they had turned their entire star system into a weapon. But the thing that terrified him most was Admiral Chen's final words. The humans weren't done. They were coming for the hegemony next. For the first time in his career, Admiral Kethron sent an emergency signal to the High Council with a single word: help. The hegemony High Council chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. Today, it witnessed something new: fear. Supreme Chancellor Morden stood before the holographic display showing the remains of Admiral Kethron's fleet. 67 ships, out of 300. The 47th Conquest Fleet had been the pride of the hegemony military, equipped with weapons that could shatter moons and shields that had never failed in battle. The humans had destroyed them like they were training targets. "Explain this," Chancellor Morden said to Chief Military Advisor Zentoth. Zentoth's scaled hide had lost its usual proud coloring. "Supreme Chancellor, our initial intelligence was completely wrong. The humans were not primitive. They have been spacefaring for far longer than we detected. Their technology is not just advanced, it is beyond our current understanding." The holographic display changed to show the battle recordings from Admiral Kethron's ships. The Council watched in silence as human vessels performed impossible maneuvers, used tactics that violated everything they knew about space combat, and displayed firepower that should have required ships 10 times their size. "How long have they been hiding this?" asked Councillor Vextha. "Unknown. Our analysis suggests at least several centuries. The radio signals we detected were not their first transmissions. They were deliberately designed to make us think they were primitive." Chancellor Morden felt something cold in his stomach. "You mean they wanted us to attack them?" "It appears so, Supreme Chancellor. They were ready for us. Not just ready. They were waiting." The display showed new intelligence. Data. Spy drones sent to the edges of human space had detected something that made no sense. Human ships were everywhere, not just in the Sol system, but in dozens of star systems. Their space infrastructure was massive, hidden by stealth technology. That made hegemony sensors useless. "How many systems do they control?" Chancellor Morden asked. Zentoth manipulated the display. Red dots appeared across a section of the galaxy. "Our best estimate is 47 star systems, possibly more. Their population appears to be in the hundreds of billions." The council chamber erupted in shocked voices. Hundreds of billions? The entire hegemony controlled 60 systems with a total population of only 50 billion across all species. Impossible, declared Councillor Ketron. We would have detected such expansion. No, we would not, Xantoth replied grimly. Their stealth technology is centuries ahead of our detection capabilities. They have been expanding around us, through us, past us. We never knew they were there. Chancellor Mordun studied the display. The red dots showed human territory forming a rough sphere around hegemony space. They weren't just hiding their expansion. They had been surrounding the hegemony for centuries. What are their intentions? He asked. Unknown. But their military doctrine appears to be based on overwhelming response to any threat. When we attacked one of their worlds, they responded with enough firepower to sterilize our home system. The display changed again, showing technical analysis of human weapons. The numbers were terrifying. Human ships carried firepower ratings that exceeded hegemony dreadnoughts. Their smallest patrol vessels could destroy hegemony cruisers. Their industrial capacity was growing at rates that violated everything the hegemony knew about resource management and production. How is this possible? Councillor Vextha asked. No species develops this fast. Humans are not like other species, Xantoth explained. Their development pattern is completely different. Most species expand slowly, consolidating each system before moving to the next. Humans appear to expand and consolidate simultaneously. They take risks that other species would consider suicidal. And their weapons? Crude but effective. They do not care about elegant engineering. They care about results. A human ship might be ugly compared to our vessels, but it carries 3 times the firepower and uses manufacturing techniques that let them build ships faster than we thought possible. Chancellor Mordun was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. The hegemony had spent 3 centuries building a galactic empire. The humans had spent the same time building something bigger, hidden in plain sight. What do you recommend? He asked. Total war protocol, Xantoth said without hesitation. We mobilize every ship, every weapon, every resource. If we do not stop them now, they will stop us later. The entire military? That has never been necessary. Supreme Chancellor, this is not a normal conquest. This is survival. The humans have demonstrated the ability to destroy our fleets with ease. If we do not respond with overwhelming force, they will come for us. Chancellor Mordun looked around the chamber. The other councillors were nodding. Fear was making the decision for them. How many ships can we mobilize? 3,000 vessels, including the World Burner dreadnoughts. The World Burners. Ancient ships built during the hegemony's early expansion, designed to crack planets that refused to surrender. They had been used only twice in hegemony history. Both times entire civilizations had disappeared. And you believe this will be sufficient? Xantoth hesitated. I believe it is our only chance. The humans have shown us mercy so far. They could have pursued our retreating fleets and destroyed them completely. They chose not to. This suggests they can be reasoned with, but only from a position of strength. Chancellor Mordun made the decision that would determine the fate of 2 civilizations. Authorize total war protocol. Mobilize every ship. If the humans want to see hegemony firepower, we will show them what 3 centuries of galactic dominance looks like. As the council dispersed to prepare for the largest military mobilization in hegemony history, none of them noticed the small device hidden in the chamber's ventilation system. A device that had been recording everything, transmitting the entire conversation to a human intelligence ship stationed 3 light-years away. On Earth, President Martinez received the transmission and smiled. The hegemony was doing exactly what human strategists had predicted they would do. Total mobilization of their forces. Every ship they had, gathered in one place, ready to be destroyed in a single decisive battle. Admiral Chen, President Martinez, said into her communication device, "Prepare Phase 3. Phase 3 confirmed, Madam President, all systems are ready." President Martinez looked out her window at the bustling streets of New Geneva. People going about their daily lives completely unaware that the largest space battle in galactic history was about to begin. A battle that would determine whether humanity continued to hide in the shadows or stepped into the light as the galaxy's new dominant power. Hegemony thought they were mobilizing to destroy Earth. They didn't realize they were mobilizing to commit suicide. Humanity had been planning this war for 400 years. Every ship the hegemony built, every weapon they developed, every tactical doctrine they created had been watched, analyzed, and countered. The trap was perfect. The hegemony was about to learn why humans had a saying: "If you're going to shoot the king, you better not miss." They had missed. Now it was humanity's turn to shoot back. The Grand Armada of the Zephyrian hegemony was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. 3,000 warships, including the ancient world-burner dreadnoughts that could crack planets. Supreme Admiral Torvak commanded from the massive flagship Final Authority, a ship so large it had its own gravity generators and could carry smaller vessels in its hangar bays. As the Armada approached the Sol system, Admiral Torvak felt confident. Whatever tricks the humans had used against smaller fleets would not work against this much firepower. The world burners alone carried enough destructive power to turn Earth into an asteroid field. "Sir, we are entering the outer system," reported his navigation officer. "Begin scanning for human vessels," Torvak ordered. "I want to know where they are hiding their fleet." The scanners swept through the system and found nothing. No ships, no defensive platforms, no energy signatures. Even Earth itself appeared dark, its cities showing no power, its orbital installations silent. "Sir, the system appears to be empty," the scanner officer reported. Admiral Torvak frowned. This felt wrong. The humans had shown they were clever fighters. They would not simply abandon their home system without a fight. Keep scanning. They are here somewhere. The Armada moved deeper into the system, weapons charged and shields at maximum power. Past Neptune, past Uranus, past Saturn with its suspiciously quiet rings. Nothing moved. Nothing responded to their challenges. The silence was beginning to make the crew nervous. "Admiral," called the communication officer, "we are receiving a transmission from Earth. Put it through." The main screen lit up with the image of a human in military uniform. The name tag read Admiral Chen, the same human who had destroyed the 47th Conquest Fleet. "Greetings, Admiral Torvak," Chen said with a smile that showed too many teeth. "Welcome to the Sol system. I am Admiral Chen of the Earth Defense Force. I assume you're here to finish what your friend started?" "I am Admiral Torvak of the Grand Armada. You will surrender immediately, or we will destroy your planet." Admiral Chen laughed. "Destroy our planet? With what? Those old ships you brought? Admiral, you have no idea what you've walked into." "We have 3,000 vessels," Torvak said coldly. "Your system appears to be defended by nothing." "Appearances can be deceiving," Chen replied. "Tell me, Admiral, what do you know about human military doctrine?" "I know you use crude weapons and barbaric tactics. We use whatever works, and what works against the hegemony is simple: overwhelming, disproportionate response. You wanted to see human firepower? Let me show you what we've been hiding for 4 centuries. The transmission cut off and Admiral Torvak felt the first touch of doubt. Then his scanner officer screamed, "Sir, massive energy spike from the first planet." Mercury, the small planet closest to the sun, suddenly blazed with power. The entire world was moving, revealing itself to be something impossible. The planet wasn't a planet at all. It was a weapon. "Mass driver signatures," the scanner officer yelled. "The entire planet is a mass driver." Mercury began launching projectiles at 15% of light speed, not dozens of projectiles, thousands. The entire planet had been converted into a solar-powered railgun that could fire continuously for years. "Evasive maneuvers," Torvak commanded. "But you cannot evade 15% of light speed when you are already in the weapons range." The first wave of projectiles hit the Armada like a metal rain. Hegemony shields, designed to stop plasma and energy weapons, offered no protection against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. 30 ships died in the first minute. "Return fire on the planet," Torvak ordered. His ships launched their plasma cannons at Mercury. but the planet's surface was protected by shields that made the projectiles harmless. Worse, Mercury was accelerating the planet's spin, launching projectiles from all directions as it rotated. "Sir," the scanner officer called again, "the second planet is powering up." Venus revealed its secret as its thick atmosphere parted like curtains. The planet's surface was covered with railgun installations the size of continents. Each installation was larger than some of the ships in Torvak's fleet, and there were hundreds of them. Venus opened fire. The railgun rounds from Venus were larger than Mercury's projectiles, moving at similar speeds but designed to penetrate multiple targets. One round punched through 3 hegemony destroyers in a perfect line, the kinetic energy so massive that the ship simply disintegrated. "This is impossible," Torvak shouted. "No species converts entire planets into weapons." His communication officer looked terrified. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission from Admiral Chen." Chen's face appeared on screen again, still smiling. "How are you enjoying the demonstration, Admiral? This is just our inner system defenses. Mercury and Venus are what we call crowd control. Would you like to see what Mars can do?" As if triggered by his words, Mars began to change. The red planet's surface split apart along massive seams, revealing that the entire planet was hollow. Inside was the largest shipyard Torvak had ever seen, and it was launching vessels at an impossible rate. Ships poured out of Mars like insects from a disturbed nest. Hundreds, then thousands. They were the same ugly, overarmed human vessels that had destroyed the previous fleets, but there were so many of them that they darkened space. "Sir, I'm reading over 5,000 human ships launching from the 4th planet," the scanner officer reported, his voice breaking, "and more launching from hidden bases throughout the system." Admiral Torvak realized he had made a terrible mistake. The humans hadn't abandoned the system. They had turned the entire system into a kill box. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid had been weaponized. His armada wasn't attacking Earth. It was trapped inside the largest weapon ever. "Built! All ships, emergency retreat," he commanded. "Jump to hyperspace immediately." "Sir, we cannot," the navigation officer reported. "They are jamming our hyperspace drive somehow." On screen, Admiral Chen was still smiling. "Leaving so soon? But we haven't even started the main event yet. Computer, begin Phase 4. New contacts," appeared on the scanner display. Ships emerging from hidden bases in the asteroid belt. Ships rising from beneath the surfaces of moons. Ships that had been hiding in the shadows of planets, invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was impossibly large. Torvak's 3,000 ships were outnumbered 10 to 1, and the humans were still launching more vessels. "How many ships do they have?" he whispered. "Sir, I count over 40,000 human vessels, and the number is still climbing," the scanner officer replied. 40,000 ships. The entire hegemony military was only 8,000 vessels total, and most of those were scattered across 60 star systems. The humans had built a fleet larger than the entire hegemony navy just to defend one system. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 6 hours. The hegemony's ancient world-burner dreadnoughts, ships that had never been defeated in battle, were overwhelmed by swarms of human vessels. The humans didn't fight fair. They attacked in groups using coordinated strikes that focused overwhelming firepower on single targets. When a hegemony ship's shields failed, human boarding parties would swarm aboard. When the crew tried to surrender, the humans would capture the ship intact and turn its weapons on other hegemony vessels. It was humiliating. Admiral Torvak watched his grand armada dissolve around him. The humans weren't just winning. They were playing with their prey, testing new weapons and tactics on hegemony ships like they were training exercises. "Sir," his communication officer said quietly, "Admiral Chen is requesting surrender." Torvak looked at his tactical display. Of 3,000 ships, fewer than 200 remained. His flagship was surrounded by human vessels, any one of which could destroy it with ease. "Open the channel," he said. Admiral Chen appeared on screen one last time. "Admiral Torvak, this is your last chance to surrender. We have no interest in slaughtering your crews, but we will if you make it necessary." "You have won," Torvak said. the words tasting like poison. I surrender the Grand Armada. Smart choice. My people will board your remaining ships to ensure compliance. Oh, and Admiral? Tell your High Council that this was just our local defense force. If they want to see what happens when we get serious, they can try attacking us again. As human Marines boarded his flagship, Admiral Torvak realized the most terrifying truth of all. The humans had been holding back. This overwhelming display of power was them being merciful. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, a single human ship arrived at Zephyr Prime, the hegemony homeworld. The vessel was massive, dwarfing even the largest hegemony dreadnoughts, but it made no threatening moves. It simply took position in orbit and sent a single message. We request permission to negotiate. The Hegemony High Council had been in emergency session for months. The Grand Armada's destruction had left them defenseless. Worse, the human prisoners they had taken spoke freely about their civilization. The numbers they shared were impossible to believe, but the evidence was undeniable. Humanity controlled over 400 star systems. Their population was nearly 1 trillion individuals. They had been spacefaring for 8 centuries, not 2. Everything the hegemony thought they knew about humans was wrong. Supreme Chancellor Morden sat in the council chamber, looking older than his centuries. Before him stood the surviving members of the High Council and their newest advisor, Admiral Torvak, recently returned from human captivity. Tell us again about their ship, Chancellor Morden said. Admiral Torvak's voice was hollow. It is, called the Speak Softly. The humans say it is a diplomatic vessel. My instruments cannot calculate its weapons capacity without overloading. A diplomatic vessel? The humans have a saying, speak softly and carry a big stick. This ship is their big stick. Through the chamber's great windows, they could see the human ship hanging in space like a small moon. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Its hull covered in weapons that could destroy continents. What do they want? Asked Councillor Vextha. To talk, Torvak replied. But on their terms. They want the negotiations held aboard their ship. Chancellor Morden felt the weight of history pressing down on him. The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 3 centuries. Now they were about to surrender to a species they had tried to enslave. Very well. Signal the humans. We will negotiate. 2 hours later, Chancellor Morden and the surviving council members were transported to the human ship. The shuttle bay that received them was larger than most hegemony vessels. Human Marines in power armor provided escort, their weapons clearly visible but not threatening. The corridors of the Speak Softly were like nothing the hegemony leaders had ever seen. Clean white walls lined with displays showing star charts of human territory. The scale was staggering. Red dots representing human colonies filled sections of the galaxy the hegemony had thought were empty. They were led to a conference room where a human woman waited. She was young by galactic standards, perhaps 40 Earth years, with graying hair and calm eyes that missed nothing. Chancellor Morden, she said, standing and offering a formal bow. I am Ambassador Sarah Chen. Thank you for coming. Chen? Chancellor Morden asked. Related to your Admiral Chen? My daughter, Ambassador Chen replied with pride. Please sit. We have much to discuss. The negotiation table was simple, with chairs sized for both human and hegemony physiology. On the table were documents written in both languages and a holographic display showing the current galactic situation. Before we begin, Ambassador Chen said, I want to be clear about something. Humanity did not start this war. You attacked our world. You attempted to destroy our cities and enslave our people. Everything that followed was self-defense. Chancellor. Morden nodded. We understand this. We miscalculated. You did more than miscalculate. You revealed yourselves as the kind of species that attacks first and asks questions later. But that's not why we're here. Ambassador Chen manipulated the holographic display. It showed human territory in blue and hegemony territory in red. The blue zones completely surrounded the red ones. For 4 centuries, humanity has been watching galactic civilization. We've seen what the hegemony does to species that resist. We've recorded every conquest, every atrocity, every world that burned, Because it refused to surrender, the display changed, showing system after system where the hegemony had used overwhelming force against civilian populations. Worlds stripped of resources, populations enslaved or eliminated, entire species driven to extinction. We didn't attack Earth to defend ourselves, Ambassador Chen continued. We attacked because we decided you had been in charge long enough. Chancellor Morden felt cold understanding creep through his mind. You were waiting for an excuse. We were waiting for justification. There's a difference. Humanity doesn't start wars, Chancellor, but we finish them. The display showed new information. Human fleets positioned throughout the galaxy, ready to move at a moment's notice. Not just defense fleets, invasion forces. What are your terms? Chancellor Morden asked, dreading the answer. Ambassador Chen smiled, and for the first time it was warm instead of threatening. That's the beautiful thing, Chancellor. We don't want to conquer the hegemony, we want to replace it. She gestured to the display again. New information appeared, showing a complex network of species and civilizations. The Galactic Defense Compact, she explained. A voluntary alliance of civilized worlds dedicated to mutual protection and cooperation. No conquests, no forced surrenders, no species enslaved for refusing to comply with ultimatums. And if we refuse to join, then you become the Compact's first target. We have 47 member species already signed up. Species that the hegemony conquered or threatened. They're very eager to see justice done. Chancellor Morden looked at the list of member species. It included every civilization the hegemony had subjugated in the past 2 centuries. They had all been waiting, building strength, preparing for this moment. This was planned, he realized. For over a century, Ambassador Chen confirmed. Did you think you could rule the galaxy through fear forever? Every species you conquered, every world you burned, every population you enslaved created enemies. We just gave them hope and coordination. The terms of the Galactic Defense Compact were surprisingly reasonable. Hegemony territory would be divided among member species, with Zephyrians keeping their homeworld and immediate system. War criminals would face trial, but regular citizens would be protected. The hegemony military would be disbanded, but Zephyrians could serve in the Compact fleet. Why are you being merciful? Chancellor Morden asked. Because mercy is strength, Ambassador Chen replied. The hegemony ruled through fear. The Compact will succeed through cooperation. We want Zephyrians to choose to be part of something better, not be forced into it. Chancellor Morden looked around the conference table at his fellow counselors. They were defeated, broken, facing the end of everything they had built. But the alternative was extinction. If we sign this compact, he said slowly, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't become the new hegemony? Ambassador Chen leaned back in her chair. Because, Chancellor, humanity has been the dominant power in this galaxy for 2 centuries. If we wanted to rule through conquest, we would have done it already. We prefer to rule through example. The signing ceremony took place 3 days later, broadcast throughout the galaxy. Chancellor Morden affixed his seal to the Galactic Defense Compact, while Ambassador Chen watched. As he signed, he realized that history would remember him as the leader who surrendered the hegemony. But as he looked at the terms of the compact, at the protections for civilian populations, and the restrictions on military action, he began to think that history might judge him more kindly than he expected. The compact's first action was to send aid fleets to former hegemony worlds, offering medical supplies, food, and reconstruction assistance. No payment was required. No loyalty was demanded. It was help offered freely to species that had suffered under hegemony rule. As the human fleet departed Zephyr Prime, Chancellor Morden stood in his office watching the stars. For the first time in decades, he felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. The galaxy was entering a new age, an age where conflicts would be resolved through negotiation instead of conquest, where species would cooperate instead of competing, where bullies would face the united response of civilized worlds. And watching over it all, patient and powerful, humanity would ensure that the strong protected the weak, instead of preying on them. The hegemony had attacked first. Earth had answered, with firepower they couldn't imagine. But more importantly, humanity had answered with something the galaxy had never seen before, mercy backed by overwhelming strength. It was the beginning of peace.